The live bell rang, which means it wasn't a bell, it was just kind of a notification, which means that we're live. Welcome to the Altar Live Show. I'm Andy, and it's so good to be with you.
Yeah, I'm Maeve, and we're excited. We're excited that we're heading into the Easter weekend.
Yes, Easter weekend is right around the corner. We're going to be talking a little bit about that in a couple of minutes here. I haven't had enough coffee today. Easter week. Okay, let's wrap about this. Easter week for people in the church world is usually a sprint, and it's more so of a sprint than Christmas, because Christmas is usually a team effort where wife, kids, everybody is sprinting towards the finish line. But in the church world, you as the church worker are the only one that's really sprinting, and everybody else is like, what's wrong? Like, what do you mean you have to get ready for all these things? Like, oh my gosh. So anyway, I need more coffee. But Maeve, how's your week been so far?
It's been good. I mean, it is kind of the first time I've been a part of the sprint of the Easter season in the church world. And I had this conversation with you, Andy, kind of talking about, is it just me, or does Easter just really sneak up on you?
No, it does.
And yeah, so I've definitely been in the thick of it in terms of getting ready for Easter, in terms of stuff for the altar live with the Easter guide and different campaigns, but also, on the personal side. So it's been good, but it's definitely been a lot.
You've been getting ready for vacation as well, which is totally awesome.
Yes, I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you get out of town for a little bit and come back and regale us all with your stories of the beach.
Of nothing.
Of nothing.
Yeah. Of reading and doing nothing.
Exactly, yeah. Total awesome. Before we jump into the show, usually our circle time. I've dubbed this circle time. Actually, my thing says circle time, so it feels very kindergarten. Yeah, our scene says circle time.
And we have little circles.
Oh, later, yeah.
We're in little circles, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Circle time. As we circle up here, this is typically when we give recommendations and when we really pass on some of our worldly knowledge to you, the fine folk of the Ultra Live family. And it's my turn this week, and I wanted to sidestep a little bit of the media recommendations, because Easter dinner is probably coming up for you if you are joining us. And if you don't have an Easter dinner, I feel bad for you. Easter dinner typically has some sort of ham or sometimes people do turkey or lamb, but most of the time it's a ham. And I'm a big fan of minimal amounts of condiments. So I'm talking like, I don't even really do ketchup on my fries. Occasionally I will.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not a thing for me.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'll do like a mustard on a hot dog or something like that. But as I've grown older, maybe my taste buds have started to die a little bit more. But I've started to add more condiments. And actually my sister-in-law, so my brother's sister, a number of years ago, or my brother's wife. Ooh, that was weird. That's really weird.
I didn't even catch that. I was so invested in what you were going to say next.
Sorry, Kristen, if you are watching right now. My brother's wife, this is probably 7 or 8 years ago, introduced me to this amazing thing of mustard on ham. And it sounds so rudimentary. I had never done it. And Maeve, I have to tell you, it's the best thing in the world. Mustard on either a hot or cold slice of ham. Mm-hmm. Chef's kiss.
I'm so glad you discovered that, because it's been a staple for me for a long time.
See, I feel, and she said the same thing. She looked at me when I tried it the first time, and she looked at me like I was crazy. It's like, what? You're the crazy one for putting mustard on your ham. What are you talking about? Like, this ham, it's either honey baked ham or it's like a salty, just savory. Like, why would I want to ruin it with a condiment? And then I put a condiment on there, and oh dear, I don't know what to say. So your thoughts, Maeve, as I toss it back to you.
No, I love it. I love all kinds of mustard. I haven't met a mustard I don't like. I like honey mustard. I like spicy mustard. I like Dijon. There are these classic sandwiches that my friend makes whenever she has like the family Christmas party. It's ham, cheese and like a sweet mustardy
Mm.
sauce on like a little brioche. They're like little sliders.
Mm.
That killer. Delish.
Is it
I
like
know it's
honey mustard?
yeah, but it has some spice to it. So I don't know where she's getting it, but it is delicious. So yes, I know ham and mustard very well and it is
Well
near and
acquainted.
dear to my heart.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm just now like jumping in on the train here, but
Well, I'm glad you're aboard.
it feels good. I'm not gonna lie, and it's one of the things I'm looking forward to. That plus, I always look forward to the. So we do pick. We've talked about this before, but we do a picnic, large, gigantic
Mhm.
family picnic, and I always
So
look
fun.
forward to the. My dad makes these things called calico beans. My mom used to make them, and then
Oh.
unfortunately she passed. But she,
Mm.
um, so my dad's been carrying on the tradition, and basically it's just like every type of bean you can imagine. And I don't normally like beans, but then it's in like a
Yeah.
molasses
Oh,
barbecue with like ground beef and bacon,
that sounds
and
good.
oh my gosh, it's like baked beans to the max. Like it,
Oh, wow.
yeah, like Boston baked beans, but like not crap, like good.
Mhm.
And yeah, I look forward to that. And then my wife always makes banana pudding, and
Ooh,
she's freaking
delish.
awesome at cooking. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, enough about that. Now that I'm hungry, I need
Now
a
I'm
snack.
hungry.
Yeah, now that I'm hungry, I need a snack. Stephanie is joining us in the chat. Good afternoon, Stephanie. Let's see if I can put this
Hi,
up here
Stephanie.
without ruining all the things. Can I do this? Look at that. I did it. There it is, right there. We today are normally in the Ultra Live show. We tend to take the Ultra Live platform and break down tips and tricks and kind of really try to help you understand the platform a little bit more, understand engagement a little bit more, and understand really how to use this amazing thing to garner a little bit more community attention with your church and with your congregation. Instead of that, though, we actually wanted to talk a little bit about Easter. And Maeve and I were kind of kicking this around during our Tuesday pre production meeting and figured it'd be a good time to kind of bring you a holiday episode. It's not going to
Mhm.
be, like a sitcom that brings you clips of the previous year or anything like that, because we didn't have time to cut a whole bunch of clips together. Um, but also, we thought it would be cool to kind of walk through Holy Week and to kind
Mm.
of walk through not real in-depth theological treatises on what the days of Holy Week are, but really to kind of get us all in the mood for, especially today, which is Maundy Thursday, which Maeve's going to get to in a second, but also Good Friday, preparation Saturday, and then Easter Sunday, and kind of to slow things down for just a little bit, because like I said at the beginning of this episode, and like Maeve so rightly kind of put with me, there it is a sprint right now,
Mhm.
and we oftentimes we get so whoa, and then we forget to actually slow down and recognize what's going. So Maeve, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I want you to kind of like give me your thought process and give me kind of the whole genesis of where you've been taking this little study you've been doing.
Yeah, so like Andy said, it's Maundy Thursday, and I will preface this by saying when I was younger, I did think it was Monday
Monday,
Thursday.
Thursday. Yep, me
Yes,
too.
'cause yeah, it just sounds very similar. Um, and from the looks of it, I was like, "Oh, this looks like a Latin root," and turns out it is. So Maundy comes from the Latin word mandatum, which means command. And so Maundy Thursday is named for the important teaching, I give you a new commandment, which Jesus talks about at the Last Supper. And so when you're dealing with Maundy Thursday, you kind of think of two scenes, which is the Last Supper and the Garden of Gethsemane. And you can find this in all of the Gospels, but I was looking at John 13 through 17.
Hmm.
And at the Last Supper, you see kind of a bunch of different things happening. You have Jesus washing his disciples' feet, which is
Crazy.
radical.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's radical because of someone of such high honor stooping down to wash his disciples' feet. It was probably very uncomfortable for the disciples in the beginning, but once they realized, they started to understand. I know Peter said, "Okay, well then wash the rest of me."
Wash my whole body,
Which
God.
I know, I just love Peter.
He's such a
um,
numbskull.
he is. He really is. Um, and so when Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, he's lowering himself and also showing how he would have to wash away our sins, cleanse us, and there's so much symbolism in that you could really go on about. But so this was all at the Passover dinner, and for those of you who know, Passover is was a very like common Jewish feast. I watched a video by the Gospel Coalition, and they're saying, Jesus with his friends at Passover was like having a friendsgiving kind of
Mm.
thing, like having Thanksgiving with your friends. It was that common. But during this time, um, this is when Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and he starts revealing who he really is, even though he's been doing that this whole time, really. But then they have communion, and Andy, if you want to talk about the four cups, because that is really beautiful, and there's so much symbolism and even the simplest of passages, so you can always unpack things. So Andy, do you mind
Yeah,
touching
no,
on that a
totally.
little bit?
One of the coolest things that happens on Maundy, Thursday is Jesus institutes communion, and Paul talks about it in the book of First Corinthians. But before anything ever really happened, before the disciples really know what's going on, Jesus, towards the beginning of the meal, takes the bread and he lifts it and he breaks it, and he blesses it, and then he passes it around and he says, "Okay, every time you gather, you need to do this in remembrance of me. Like my
Mm.
body is broken for you. Remember what's going to happen." So that's kind of at the beginning of the meal. And then towards the end of the meal, and to back up a little bit, they're celebrating, like Maeve said, Passover. And this
Mm.
is traditionally what's called the Passover Seder dinner. The Seder dinner is a very traditional dinner. It's got a lot of movements and a lot of themes. It is very liturgical. There's a book they would follow, or a scroll at the time, that they would follow out of. They would eat they would eat something, and then they would remember, and then they would eat something, and then they would remember. And a lot of the stuff is weird. They're eating like bitter herbs, so herbs that have been like soaked in salt water. They're eating matzah, unleavened bread, which is just crackers or wafers at the time. They're eating a lot of kind of odd things. And this dinner, the Passover meal, was to help the Israelites to remember that God had brought them out of a 400-year captivity, and God was always going to be delivering them, and God was going to bring them through the waters of the Red Sea, and God was going to bring them to the Promised Land, and even in spite of their sin and all of the other crap, that God was going to be there for them. And so what happens is, as they progressively go through this meal, they end up taking 4 different cups of wine. And there's a lot of symbolism to each of these cups. So that it first starts off, and the first cup is, a cup of, they call it the cup of deliverance. But what it actually is a remembrance of is that this cup is kind of the cup of creation. And so they take and they pass this cup around. There's wine in there, and they take and they drink, and they remember that God created. And so the second cup is actually the cup of what's called the Messianic age. Now, Messiah means deliverer. So the ancient Hebrews would have seen this as a twofold promise. So the people around the Passover dinner, those that didn't really believe that Jesus was the Messiah yet, they would have understood this cup to mean that God had delivered them, and the promise that God was going to continue to deliver them. And so when, he would eventually provide a Messiah. At that time, they thought the Messiah was going to be somebody that was going to throw off the shackles of ancient Rome, and they were going to militarily deliver the Jewish nation, and, Israel would be reformed, and yada, yada, yada. But what Jesus was essentially saying is, as he's passing around, is, look, this is the enactment of the Messianic age. Like, we're living in this age right now. Towards the end of the meal, there is a third and a fourth cup that gets passed around. The third cup that gets passed around is actually a cup that Jesus lifts and blesses it, and then he passes it around, and he says, "This is the blood of the new covenant shed for you." And what this cup actually represents is those that have died coming back to life. So if you think about what's going to happen in 18 short hours, Jesus is going to be crucified.
Mm.
maybe even less than 18 hours, could be 12 hours. He'll be nailed on the cross and probably dead in 18 hours. So if you think about the progression of the cups, you think about the progression of ancient Jewish history, Jesus is essentially saying, look, as you partake of this cup, remember that I died and I came back to life.
Mm.
And then the fourth cup, the last cup of wine that gets passed around at the Passover dinner, I'm taking up a lot of time here, Maeve, I'm so sorry. The fourth cup that gets passed around is actually the cup of new creation. So this is the cup that if you read into the end of the book of the Bible, or the last book of the Bible, into the book of Revelation 16, 17, and 18 especially, and then on into 20, 21, and 22, Jesus kind of references what's going to happen while he's on the cross. And he says, I can't drink of any wine. I can't drink of any painkillers or anything like that, because the next time I do drink of this fruit of the vine will be with you in heaven. And what he's essentially saying is, look, in the book of Revelation, although there was no book of Revelation at the time, but in the book of Revelation, you're going to see a picture of me drinking from this cup of the new creation, which is the new Jerusalem, which is now heaven, which is now eternally where I'm going to spend my life with you. So the four cups have this sort of progression, and Jesus stops after the third cup and says, look, we are now between ages. We are now between the Messianic age, the age that the dead have come back to life, and the age of the new covenant. And this is where you will do your ministry. And that's how he enacts it. And that's what communion represents.
And that's amazing. And it kind of brings us to that new commandment. And the new commandment is love one another just as I have loved you. And it's crazy to think at that time they really had no idea what really that meant, because Jesus hadn't died yet. And we know the weight of it, but at that time they don't know the weight. And it's amazing to think of how much weight that short but powerful commandment holds. And the fact that it's like the new commandment, they're like, you can listen to the 10 commandments, but this is the new one. And the fact that they added, he added something, probably at that point, the disciples are probably comfortable with him switching things up, but still.
Well, except for Judas, who was way uncomfortable with everything, and that's why he sought to betray him. But if you also look at Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, so Matthew 5, Matthew 6, Matthew 7, which was towards kind of the middle part of Jesus's ministry. He had already gathered the disciples together. It was probably, they theorized it was probably between the first and second year of his ministry. Jesus looks at the people that are gathered on the side of the mountain and he says, look, I am the fulfillment of all of those 10 commandments. My person is the fulfillment. And so I am the new covenant. Love one another is now the new commandment. And it's all taken up in the Great Commission in Matthew 28 at the end of the book, which is this weird synergy that Matthew, the tax collector, who now is a gospel writer, it's this weird synergy that he has inside of his book, where he then says, okay, the Great Commission, Jesus has come back. He's about ready to ascend to heaven. Spoiler. And he looks at his disciples and says, go and baptize, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the Holy Spirit, and I will be with you to the end of the age type thing. And what that is essentially saying is, so this last cup here ties into the fact that Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the new covenant. Love each other. And hey, by the way, to love each other, you need to go make disciples. It's kind of this huge overarching thing that Jesus says. And that's the Easter story right there, wrapped up in a nutshell. Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And then we're always talking about how we don't necessarily have to turn to Altar Live, but we're also, but the way that we talk about the Great Commission, about how online is the new ends of the earth, the way we can reach people through Altar Live and digital church.
Well, I think it's a good, again, not to derail the Easter topic, but I think you bring up a real good point. And we've talked about this before on the show of how, yes, the Great Commission is fulfilled in church buildings and in all of that other kind of our traditional styles of ministry. Not that they're bad, not that any of that is bad, but there is a new hybrid approach that Altar Live is championing, that says that, okay, digital might not be the end all be all of church ministry, because you still kind of got to figure out some of the specifics of baptism. You got to figure out communion. You got to figure out some of the sacramental things. But by and large, you can go to the nations and you can preach the gospel and you can reach the unreached people and you can church the unchurched people with a digital platform like Altar Live. And again, this is not stumping for the platform, although we love to stump for the platform and we highly recommend it to everybody out there watching. But the very core of it is taking this back to Easter. Altar Live fulfills what Jesus was saying on those last days. This is like
Mm,
an embodiment of what the gospel can do. So it's kind of cool.
yeah.
You want to talk about the Garden of Gethsemane real quick?
Sure, yeah. So after the Passover dinner, we go into the Garden of Gethsemane where we see the full humanity of Jesus, because he is feeling all the feelings, sweating blood, and people having like a full meltdown. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. He was having a lot of emotions during that time. And when I was young, I'd be like, oh, he's just scared of dying. But no, that wasn't the real fear. The fear was being away from God and taking on the wrath of God for us. And as you grow older, you just realize how much weight and how powerful that is,
Hmm,
and makes Easter have a lot of depth and weight to it.
absolutely.
Yeah, which is good, but it can be hard.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yes, definitely. And we see Judas betray Jesus and hand him over to the Roman soldiers, and it's heartbreaking, but
Hmm,
we know that there's hope on Easter Sunday. But we see Jesus being fully human, but also fully God, because when the Roman soldiers come and they ask, are you Jesus? Is this the man that we're searching for? I don't think you get this in the Bible, but I read somewhere in the Greek translation he says I am,
yeah.
and that kind of goes back to the burning bush when you hear um, God's real name with Yahweh, which is I am
I
who I
am. I
am.
am. Yep.
I am. And so you see Jesus being fully human and fully God
Hmm.
in that moment, which is so powerful.
Yeah, and it's actually in I believe the book of Luke where it says I am He,
Mm,
in the NIV and the NLT and some like the ESV, some of the modern English translations. And there's a little footnote that Luke adds in there because he's a very meticulous gospel writer, and he's when Jesus says I am He, the guards around him fall backwards with the
mm,
weight of what he just said. Like it's this innate power that explodes
wow.
out from Jesus, and it's because it has that sort of the Yahweh, the Yad Ash Ve Ash. I can't ever pronounce the Hebrew, whatever the YWHW is, and
Hmm.
and so when he says that, it is a declaring divinity over all of these things. And so technically, the Garden of Gethsemane leads into Good Friday. We kind of know how the story ends there. He gets betrayed. He goes before the Jewish authorities. The Jewish authorities drag him to Pilate. Pilate kicks him back to the high priest Caiaphas and Ananias. They kick him back to Pilate. Pilate then gets the same crowds that 5 days later had hailed Jesus as a king when he was entering Jerusalem on Palm Sunday are
Mm,
now yelling crucify him because he hasn't saved them and he hasn't lived up to their expectations, and because the angry mob is an angry mob, and we all know what happens with angry mobs because we're on social media and we we understand. Jesus Pilate grows weak, doesn't want to go against the mob, sentences Jesus to death. Jesus goes to the cross. He's kind of nailed to the cross. Usually it says between 8 and 9 a.m. in the morning. There's a darkness that hangs over the land until noon. Jesus breathes his last breath around between 12 and 1
mm,
ish their time. A darkness falls over the land at that point completely. The earth shakes. The temple veil is torn, which was a massive 4
mm.
inch, 20-foot tall curtain. It's torn open. People that are dead come back to life, which again, think about the cups. The people that are
Amazing.
dead rise in the streets of Jerusalem and just walking around, which has got to be crazy. The Roman centurion who is presiding over the whole thing looks at Jesus on the cross and says, "Surely this must be the Son of God."
Mm. Oh my
There
gosh.
are there are then sources that say that man became a Christian because he believed in the divinity of Christ. We have Preparation Saturday, where Jesus lies dormant in a tomb, and it feels like the entire earth is in sorrow. And then you have Easter morning at daybreak, so around about 6:30-ish. A stone has been rolled in front of the tomb. The stone has been now rolled away, miraculously. There is no Jesus left in the tomb. And we know the end of that story. And we know that the same power that defeated the death of a cross now lives inside of all of us that call him Lord and Savior. And it's a beautiful, beautiful picture of what that fourth cup represents. New life, eternal life that we will be drinking from if we but call Jesus Lord and Savior. And it's priceless. And it really is we would not have Christmas if we did not have Easter. We would not have a church if we would not have Altar Live. Maeve and I would not be sitting here yammering on the internet if we did not have Easter Sunday some 2,000 years ago. And so we cannot help but be thankful, and we cannot help but just take a moment during these next couple of days and quiet our hearts and just remember like the pain that Jesus went through and the suffering that we sometimes think we go through, and Jesus knows that same suffering. I'm sermonizing right now. I'm sorry. I'm preaching right now.
No, it's good. I really like what you said. I know we have to log off very soon, but I like what you said about really quieting our hearts and taking our time, because we were talking about how it can be such a sprint. But, in these next few days, I think really, really taking time to prepare our hearts, have quiet time, slow down, and really think and pray and ponder, because so much to be thankful for, so much to pray about, so much to learn more about too.
Absolutely. I'm going to fade the music in because we do have to kind of log off here. We could talk about Easter all day. We want you to know, church leader, church worker, staff, anybody, that we're praying for you. Maeve and I are both praying for you, and we will continue to pray for you. We're praying for your digital services. We're praying for your in-person services. We're praying for the people that are going to come to knowledge of Jesus Christ. This is one of the big 3 days that people actually turn back to a church, whether that is online or in person. Christmas, Easter, and Mother's Day. And that's the big three, for better or for worse. And we want you to know that we love you, we support you, and we're here for you. If there's anything we can help with over the next couple of days, especially, reach out to us on any of our socials, in our Facebook group, in just even our online or our altarlive.com chat, that little chat bubble that pops up in the bottom right-hand corner. We would love to hang out with you, and yeah, it's Easter, man. Let's do this gosh darn thing.
Bye,
Maeve,
guys.
Thanks for being with us. Maeve, have a great vacation.
Thank you, and have a happy Easter. I pray everything goes well on your end.
I'm praying for a safe trip for you guys. Love everybody on the other side of this camera. We will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.